Senate candidate Graham Plattner facing calls to drop out of the race after a woman accused him of sexually assaulting her, which he denies. MS Now's Britt Miller has the details.
Graham Plattner, Maine's embattled Senate Democratic nominee, facing fresh allegations of sexual assault, now threatening the future of his campaign. MS Now does not identify victims of alleged sexual crimes unless they come forward publicly. But his accuser, 41-year-old Jenny Rasicot, telling multiple outlets she dated Plattner on and off for 2 years, alleging in 2021 he showed up at her home uninvited and drunk, forcing himself onto her. She details those painful claims on CNN.
I remember specifically him grabbing at my chest, and I hit his hand and I said, "Don't touch me." And I remember that during the altercation.
Did Graham Plattner rape you?
By definition, yes. Absolutely.
In an effort to verify her claims, Political reports they spoke to someone Rasicot dated and confided in while reviewing documents like emails with Rasicot's therapist and messages from Rasicot to an acquaintance warning them about Plattner before he ran for office. Rasicot argues her revelation isn't politically motivated, adding she was torn between supporting Plattner's politics and him as a person.
That was actually one of the huge reasons that I didn't come forward and still struggled. That was a huge moral conflict. I like the things that he speaks about. They're important. They're important to people. I'm one of those people.
Plattner releasing a video strongly denying the new allegations.
I wanted to directly address the troubling, serious, and false allegations against me. Any accusation of non-consensual behavior is categorically false. So, regardless of the inaccuracy of the reporting, but mindful of the political reality it will inflict, we are taking the time to reflect on the best path forward.
The Progressive Democrat is hoping to unseat Republican Senator Susan Collins, but some party heavyweights are already scrapping their support for the Marine veteran, including Plattner's strongest allies. Representative Ro Khanna saying, quote, Plattner should drop out from the race, and Senator Ruben Gallego calling the allegations, quote, troubling and deeply serious. But these new accusations add another thread to Plattner's web of controversies, including alleged abuse towards women, a Nazi-linked tattoo, which he has since had covered, vulgar comments online, and a sexting scandal early on in his marriage. Plattner has confirmed those behaviors, but denies being physical towards women. Just last month, MS Now's Chris Hayes questioned Plattner about any other past transgressions coming to light.
At this point, I guess people have to take you at your word that that's true and that there's nothing else. Is that what you are saying?
Yes, of course.
And Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer says the party's Senate campaign arm won't invest in this race if Plattner doesn't withdraw. He has until Monday to decide. Otherwise, his name stays on the ballot. Back to you.
MS Now's Britt Miller with that report. Mika also a few weeks ago repeatedly pressed Graham Plattner on that very question of whether there was more coming. He said no, nothing that he was worried about. Let's bring in MS Now congressional reporter Kevin Fry. He joins us live from Portland, Maine. Kevin, good morning. So Britt ticked through some of the support that has evaporated just in the last few hours, importantly from the Maine Democratic Party and nationally from the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee. That's Chuck Schumer and Kirsten Gillibrand, the two senators from New York. How is this playing so far, though, among voters? We've been talking this morning about how resilient through all of these scandals and controversies Plattner has been. This one, though, given the level of detail and the accusation, feels different.
Yeah, I mean, and this is kind of the worst fear that not only Democratic operatives here in Maine, but also some of the voters that I talked to just a few weeks ago when we were here on the ground ahead of primary day, when the latest batch of allegations against Plattner first surfaced, that being the sexting scandal at the time. At the time, I asked multiple voters, okay, so is there a red line? Is there a line where you're no longer willing to forgive and forget and argue that this is a man who has changed his life and is willing and moving forward? And they were never able to really spell that out for me at the time. One woman went so far as to say, basically, look, you're voting for a candidate. You're not looking to marry him or date him. I was texting with one of those folks that I spoke with the last time I was here last night, and basically asking, does this change the paradigm at all for you when it comes to whether you would back him? And she basically said, obviously, these new allegations are troubling. She hadn't had a chance to read through all of them, but she argued that, look, she has to determine whether or not these are, in her words, legit accusations, are part of the party basically trying to remove him. Read into that as what you will. As we talk to voters today, that's going to be really kind of the main question I have, though, is have we now breached the point of no return? Obviously, that has happened with the Democrats across the country. The idea that the DSCC, Schumer, Gillibrand are not going to be introducing funding to help here in Maine. Obviously, this is one of their prime targets, one of the main pickup opportunities they need to secure in order to win back control of the U.S. Senate. That is rather telling. The other thing that was notable last night is you saw the Democrats in a lot of those competitive Senate races across the country, in Texas, Ohio, North Carolina, all coming out and saying it is time for Plattner to go. So that's some of the tea leaves that at least we're reading as of last night.
So, Kevin, Plattner does have a few days to make up his mind. Some people think it may come much sooner than that. If he does decide, in fact, to step aside, the Maine Democratic Party already has been talking about and thinking about certainly what comes next, a scramble that would give them a couple of weeks to put somebody else on the ballot. Are you starting to hear about those sort of contingency plans?
Yeah, so essentially our understanding of the timeline goes something like this, which is Monday is the key day by which Plattner either needs to step aside or not and determine whether or not he remains on the ballot. The easiest option for Democrats wanting to get a new face and a better chance of beating Susan Collins is for him to go away by then. And then essentially the party has about 2 weeks to come up with an alternative, whether that be through a meeting, a sort of caucus, whether that be the party big heads and individuals come together and come up with an alternative name. Already we're seeing lots of names being batted around, be it failed gubernatorial candidates who may have done somewhat well in the gubernatorial election here just a few weeks ago, but didn't actually secure the Democratic nomination. We're hearing about actors like Patrick Dempsey. Various names are being floated around. The question is, can they rally around someone? We know part of the friction here, though, is certainly that obviously Plattner was a very outspoken progressive who was more than willing to bat against the party establishment in Washington, including Schumer. Do the voters here want someone who also fits in that vein, but maybe doesn't have that amount of baggage? That's going to be one of the things that I think the party leaders are going to now have to be kind of grappling with.
As you say, some reporting that Plattner, if he does leave, would like a say in who takes this campaign from him. Congressional reporter for MS Now, Kevin Fry, reporting for us from Portland, Maine. Kevin, thanks. We appreciate it. So, Elise, we have cataloged over the last several months all the accusations, the Nazi tattoo, all the things, the past statements on social media that he has made, and Maine voters have been willing to live with it for the most part. And it's fascinating to hear Kevin's reporting. You can kind of apply what some voters are saying about Plattner to what they said to Republicans about Trump over the years, which is, we're electing a president, not a saint. In this case, we're electing a senator. We don't have to marry him, all that. So they're trying to get themselves to a place where they can stay with him. But do you think it's different this time?
This has been a slow motion train wreck. And I do think it's different from Trump just because he had that very developed public persona of he was who he was, and that was his famous brand. And voters wanted something like that. Here, they thought that they were getting a vet. He might be rough around the edges, have PTSD, which, granted, PTSD does not cause you to do the things that Graham Plattner has repeatedly said, used as his excuse. But that said, he has had so many problems over these last 6-7 months, has it been the year that he's entered the race, that you just can't look beyond it. Like, this guy clearly is a ticking time bomb. And what else is there to come even? This is horrible, a breaking and entering and rape allegation. And there previously before was also a very credible accuser who, frankly, did not get the attention that she deserved or treated with the respect she deserved for her allegations, Lindsay Fiffield.